What's up, everyone? This is Let Me Know How It Is, a podcast about all things geek. For today's episode, the guys and I discuss the concept of the teenage superhero and what makes it so darn great. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. First off, a quick note to all the listeners. We recorded this one via remote conferencing, so that's why we might sound a little bit different. All right, so Marvel's latest event kicks off with a one-shot titled Outlawed, presented by writer Eve Ewing and artist Jim Giacinto. I hope I'm saying that right. This event will focus primarily on Marvel's teenage heroes as their existence gets called into question, which in turn puts them at odds with the adult heroes. So this seemed like a perfect opportunity to explore the teenage hero as a concept and why it works so well. I'm Zach Slater.
I'm Frank Melman.
I'm Tommy Smithereens.
I'm Clifton.
All right, so I think Spider-Man is kind of the shining example of the concept, but we would have to admit the fact that Robin as the sidekick was kind of introduced first some 20 years prior. So who do you guys think did more for the concept in general of those two?
I'd have to go with Robin. I mean, because technically Spider-Man is a teenage superhero, but he's not really a sidekick. He's more along the lines of, you know, it's not so much in I don't think in the early stuff that anyone really realizes he's a kid. Or a high school student, I should say. I mean, they do it more in Ultimates. I think it's like the Ultimate 6, that miniseries where when the Avengers find out, I should say the Ultimates find out that he's a kid. Tony Stark's like, that kid took out more villains than you guys combined.
Right.
And he's only 16.
Right.
But I think just for the, if we're looking more at the concept of teenage sidekicks or just teenage superheroes.
Well, teenage superheroes in general, so that would encompass the sidekicks. So I'm actually kind of surprised that you said Robin, because for me, I would say Spider-Man, because I think Spider-Man kind of showed us the way of like how it can be done really, really well, whereas sort of the civilian aspect of things is just as important as the superheroing, and sometimes more important, I would say.
Sure, I can see that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, I'm not the most up to date on like my 50s Robin stories and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But
they're in outer space, Zach. They're all in outer space.
Yeah. So okay. So is Robin like trying to date like the teenage green chick on Mars or anything that?
No, I think in those it's more along the lines of the fact that they're, you know, I think the closest thing you get to that sort of thing is the original Batgirl trying to trap him. You know, trying to get him, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But I don't think there's as far as I know, there's no, you know, alien girls don't come along until the 80s.
Original Batgirl Betty Kane.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Clifton. Yeah. But I think until you get to like in the 80s when it's Coriander or Starfire is the first place we get a moment of, you know, him dating an alien, so to speak. So
I was just joking, and sure enough, you just find the actual example of like, yeah, that happens, Zach.
It does.
That's right.
It absolutely does.
I keep forgetting all about Corey and Starfire, which is funny. Yeah. You think I wouldn't?
No, I would think I wouldn't. I don't. But yeah, to me, it's one of those things where it progresses at that point, but before that, it's Barbara, you know, another teenage superhero. But up until the 80s, then it's all about Starfire. So.
Tommy, what do you think? Who's more important for the concept, Spider-Man or Robin?
Me thinking it's probably Spider-Man, because Robin only graduates in a way to what Spider-Man always was. At one point or another, we have the sidekicks always sat alongside the main hero, but ultimately we just want to see what the teenage hero can do on their own without the guidance of their mentor, so to speak. But one thing, I think what people forget a lot is X-Men started out as teenage heroes. But no really emphasized or even talked about it, because I guess they just didn't seem like it at the time with Spider-Man taking the mantle. But I would have to say that Spider-Man was what they all graduate to be, even with Teen Titans as a group.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about Spider-Man, different than all the rest, even contemporaries like the original class of X-Men, is that all the other teen heroes were mentored. And Spider-Man was the first teen hero that was out there doing it on his own without adult supervision. And I think that's what really makes him stand out.
Yeah, no, that's a excellent point. Actually, yeah. I mean, he is. Yeah, until like Frank, you're right. Like until Ultimates, really, like everybody thought Spider-Man was an adult
Right.
in there, and nobody really knew he was a kid. Yeah, I mean, look, nobody loves Robin more than I do, but I just think as far as this, I think that Robin later, like in the 80s and 90s, I think every teen hero is informed by Spider-Man at some point. Now.
Right. I understand what you're saying. I'm not arguing that point. My thing is just the idea that we wouldn't get Spider-Man without Robin, right? Because
Right.
Robin's the one where like they decide that they want to have a kid in the mix, so that basically they can have someone to have the kids to relate to, because you can't really relate to Batman, I guess.
Yeah,
But,
that was always such a strange
right?
concept to me, that like, yeah, the idea that Robin was created because as a kid you couldn't imagine yourself as Batman because he was a grown-up, but you can imagine yourself as Robin, the kid that gets to hang out with Batman. And I'm like, that's crap.
Right. Yeah.
To me, like that's not how make-believe works.
What about
What
about Bucky making like war bonds fun for kids?
but I get that concept because it's in the depiction itself. Even Spider-Man, Spider-Man, even in his name alone, it's not like he's called Spider Boy. You know, it's the thinking that you can only do this if you're grown up. But with Robin, he is a kid. He's not pretending to be grown up. How he acts is not overly mature. You know, he doesn't outsmart people. He just uses his youthful energy to assist a grown up in ways that a kid is impeded, right? I mean, this is like, think about it as a kid. You know, you want to, hey, Dad, let me help you at work, and any mature or thoughtful dad, like, no, you can't help me at work. Go do what you have to do. But this is in a way a kid's dream to go help dad at work, right?
Well, I think part of that is funny is when you say that Robin's youthful energy is what carries him. But it's funny that if you look at what any appearance of Robin with the Teen Titans, where basically they're put together in a group, everybody looks to him. Like it's not like the rest of the group is up for leadership. Think about how long Dick Grayson was Robin, and think about how long everybody in Teen Titans from like the beginning are like, no man, you're the guy. You're the one supposed, like, against other kids, he's highly mature.
No, that's, I mean, to me, that's just ours in the company you keep. I mean,
but that's other teen superheroes in that case.
But it's to me, it's the company you keep. I mean, and on top of that, his training preceded Batman, so he's mature beyond any of their wildest dreams. I mean, all of them were chosen at maybe let's say like with Wonder Girl or with Wally, they're still a little bit older when they start superhero. Dick starts off when he's maybe 4 or 5 with his actual parents, to be quite honest.
But so, not crowd fighting.
No, but I mean, still, I think high flying trapeze artists would be scarier still. I mean, and he did that every day, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was indoctrinated to him. So I think it supersedes Batman. I mean, Batman picked the greatest person who could ever do it at that age. I don't think any other kid could be able to do it like Dick could, just because Dick was ingrained into like the family business from birth. So
there is a sentiment that essentially like Bruce's first like protege was like he picked the most
groomed,
naturally gifted athlete that he could find.
Yeah. So that leads into it too. Everybody else is like, okay, thanks for choosing me. And then they start as teenagers. Dick started like damn near as a toddler. You don't see it that way or anything?
No, I mean, I see what you're saying. It's just one of those things where, again, when you were the one to say that it was youthful exuberance, and I'm like, well, yeah, up until you put him against other kids, and other kids, it's gradually become more and more of like, what do you think we should do, Dick? It's always Robin. What do you think we should do? That's my only point. Is like, yeah, you can argue that against Batman, he's bright and he's youthful. That's part of the, that's what the character basically is. But I'm saying as soon as you put him in this position of being in, like, say, in a team, to me, he's like Cyclops. Cyclops is the same way, where when they're teenagers, he's all standoffish and kind of brooding, while the rest of them are sort of mixing it up and goofing around.
Yeah,
that's not Cyclops. Cyclops doesn't do that, and I think it's the same thing for Robin. Robin sort of stands apart from that group, not as much, but I think it's one of those things where, when it comes to being around other kids his age or near his age, he's naturally going to be the one that's going to be, I guess, thrust in the position of being in charge.
Yeah, but I will say this too: with all other teams, to me, it tends to be a trope. The one that has no powers generally, or I guess ends up being the best tactician just because he has no powers.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes.
Well, I'm not saying it's all the time,
Right?
But in a lot of cases, he's thrust in that role because he has to think it out, because he's the one that doesn't have speed. He's the one that doesn't have strength. With the exception of what maybe Speedy.
Right. He's also learned under possibly the best tactician and strategist in the universe.
Yeah.
Also, so he has that bent to it for sure. But so I guess though, so why do we think this concept works so well?
But the team,
Yeah.
I think it's creepy. I mean,
okay,
because I think it's the scariest thing ever. I think it was a wish fulfillment that the audience of the people who read comics at one point the most were kids. So to put kids into it would make them want to see it even more. But the more you get into stories and embracing it, I mean, I get why Marvel would bring that topic forward, because ain't no way in hell I let my kid do that stuff. I mean, upon finding out that it's a dream that you're not related to your mentor, because they're detached from the responsibility of sending you out to die every day. Are you kidding? No.
Well, that's why they're mostly orphans, Tom.
Yeah, no, I get that. You see that a lot in Japanese manga too. Oh my God, don't be an orphan in Japanese manga because you're primed for use or for being used. I see it the same way. As soon as you're
take them in from broken homes.
Yeah, you take them in from a broken home. That you're great, especially if both parents died. Jeez,
it's like a cult.
Yeah,
yes. Right. You can. But again, getting back to the original X-Men. Think about them. For the most part, I mean, some of them have parents, some of them don't. But some of them,
But it's all
some of them got sent off by their parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
And some of them have parents that are in space.
Yeah. But right.
Yeah, but
that too.
Yeah, but they're being lied. Their parents are being lied to. And that's the prime for grooming. As soon as you don't have that parental guidance around you, I can teach you whatever. I can teach that kid whatever the hell I want them to learn.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, I agree.
That's why I say it's creepy. It's in some sense it's a cult, and you feel sorry for them because they don't have a quote unquote normal childhood from that point forward.
Right?
God, it's like Michael Jackson's Ranch is the X-Men's.
No, it's not that bad.
No.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, but they don't have a normal childhood either, anyway, because they're mutants.
I agree, but that doesn't mean you can't have a normal childhood just because you're a mutant, right?
I don't know. I mean, the whole idea that they're persecuted, so this is their safe haven to sort of like be themselves and learn how to control their powers
and become part of a kid army. That's
but oh my God, a kid army. You see what you're saying, right? It's like you're superseding one moral judgment for another. Just because you're not doing this doesn't mean it's better. It's just another person being used.
Well, I mean, it could be. I mean, I think you're taking it a little cynical, than rather opposed to the fact that, at that point, Xavier's seen good and bad mutants, quote unquote, and the idea that he wants the next generation to realize what's at stake isn't necessarily, a bad thing.
No, but that's my point. It is a bad thing. I said it because
I know, I get that.
Yeah, I said it because he's not picking adults to fight his war. He's picking children that he can easily groom and manipulate to bend to his will to fight these adults. Because
I think there weren't that many mutants at that point in time, and the ones presenting were teenagers
that he found, right?
Tommy, I mean, what's Xavier's power set?
Yeah, but that makes him more creepy.
I'm just saying, if he had to, why wouldn't he just take every mutant by force mentally and make them do that? If that was what his whole idea was.
The argument's out on that as well. Who's to say he didn't?
Okay.
But what I'm saying,
I mean,
so why did he stop with those 5?
But
what I'm saying is,
right,
he started with those 5, but his next incarnation were older, significantly older, right? They weren't teenagers.
Well, he took what he had to get at that point.
Yeah, but that-
If we're talking, are we talking all giant size?
All new. All,
Yeah,
new-
I'm definitely talking giant size.
Okay,
But what I'm saying is,
because
it's you're justifying his use of teenagers and lying to their parents in order to fight his secret war, right?
sure.
But that's bad in itself. Now, mind you, I'm not saying I didn't find joy and pleasure from reading those stories, but if I break it down, ooh, who's the villain really? Magneto or Xavier?
It's still
well,
not,
Xavier's mission is only to defend humans who persecute and hate them.
right,
Magneto's the one trying to kill the humans.
or enslave them.
Yeah. But at one point, you almost got them all killed on the island, right?
Mhm.
And where was Magneto? Was Magneto anywhere to be found on that island?
No, but that doesn't mean it's. It doesn't. I don't think he sent them there to die.
No, but he did that every time. It's not the it wasn't the initial reason, but it could always be the end result.
Well, sure.
But that doesn't justify the action, does it?
Again, I still think that it's not. I don't look at it as cynically as you do. The idea that the only reason they're going is because he wants to fight their secret. He wants them to fight his secret war. I still think the idea of letting them know that the stakes are pretty high. This is what's going on. This is how things are going to get, and it only gets, as comics do, it only gets bigger and bigger exponentially to what the threat is to them and or the planet.
But as an adult, shouldn't he take that into consideration?
I'm sorry, which part?
Just using kids.
Yeah, but it's also, the other thing about Xavier is he wants integration. He wants humanity, and he wants mutant kind to be able to get together. It's the idea of, we're going to teach you how to be okay with yourself, how to master your powers. And oh yeah, by the way, we sometimes have to fight for our lives.
Yeah, but it's just
That's the aim of the of Xavier's. The Xavier Institute from the beginning is your powers out of control. You're found by Cerebro. I'm bringing you here where it's safe. And oh, by the way, we sometimes have to fight against other mutants for our lives.
I think you're applying like modern storytelling sensibilities and what everybody's done to Xavier after the fact. And in the 60s, when they were created, like Xavier was on the up and up. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's
he wasn't the guy that he revealed to be later on, where he did have his own secrets, and he did have his own skeletons in the closet and stuff like that and everything.
But that's the implication. What I'm saying is wrong is wrong. I get what you're saying, and I'm just fighting it from a perspective of thought provoking. Now, what I'm saying is, I understand that they took away the responsibility and the reality of the situation only to provide you with good stories. But that doesn't give justification towards the action. That's what I'm trying to say. For me, I prefer Spider-Man, because in the role of Spider-Man, it's seen as no responsible adult will let a child do this, even though they're capable of doing it. He understood it and did it anyway on his own. That's what makes it, to me, a bit more plausible. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So
let's run with that. Yeah.
But with that,
I just think that there is a little bit of a grain of salt that you have to accept, where, okay, I'm just gonna accept the idea that a 12-year-old kid is gonna go out there and can overpower an adult man, who's mugging somebody out in the street and everything. There's a little bit of a grain of salt that you have to go along with. And I think like many of the concepts in comics, I think if you tug on too many strings, it unravels pretty easily.
Well, to me, it just lends to more stories. Like with Teen Titans, I get that they had to separate themselves from the adults because the adults felt, or at least let's say Batman felt, that he needed to be omnipresent for Robin because there's situations he thinks he couldn't handle. But Robin feels he's more mature to do it. So he gets with other kids in order to be the man that he's not becoming with Batman. Does that make sense? I'll eat that. But with Xavier, whew. But no, I get why they came out during that time. But I don't mind pulling on strings in order to create a stronger concept as to why he would do such an incredulous thing,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think the concept works beautifully. I really do, and I think for me the reason is that it opens up a whole kind of plethora of type of stories that you could tell. Right? It increases or changes up the kind of drama that you can have in your story, right? Because you're opening up the Archie comics teenage like romance drama aspect that's not really there for all the adult heroes. And I think that was the real genius of Spider-Man. That on top of the fact that he was relatable because he was kind of this geeky kid, and he wasn't the strapping, good-looking, billionaire, right? But also he was the guy that had girl problems. He had crushes on this girl that liked the jock, the next guy over. It didn't give Peter the time of day.
Right. No, I think that when you're looking at the blueprint of, like you said earlier, the blueprint of how do we balance, I'm doing all the superhero stuff, but at the same time I have all these teenage problems, or I have all these young adult problems. I agree with you that Spider-Man does. I mean, that's the template. Like, you don't get stuff like, you don't get Static, you don't get Ms. Marvel, the Kamala Khan stuff without early Spider-Man. You don't get
Invincible
for sure. You don't get Buffy.
No, you don't.
You don't get Buffy the Vampire Slayer without those Ditko and Lee Spider-Man stories. Not at all.
Yeah,
Doesn't work.
but to me, Spider-Man works the strongest because it doesn't shirk from the responsibility of being a child or being a kid like the other ones do. As soon as you pull it out of that responsibility thought process, it becomes something that's dated, in my opinion. That's to me, Spider-Man's ahead of its time, and because of that, didn't shirk that responsibility, that grand outlook to it. It holds up over the years.
Oh yeah, a lot of that stuff is still relatable. Even people. I think the only time it's really been done well when people try to visit or revisit it. A lot of the untold tales, wouldn't you say, Zach, are pretty reminiscent of the early stuff?
By Kurt Busiek.
Yeah, the Kurt Busiek stuff in the 90s. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the Patrick
for a long time, I think that was the only like really great Spider-Man on the rack, in my opinion, because that was coming out during Clone Saga stuff and everything. Yeah, but then you had this nice throwback book that was for 99 cents cover price, which even then was cheaper than everything on the rack. I remember. Yeah, no, I think that is a really great forgotten book. And we've gotten Ultimate Spider-Man after the fact, which I think Ultimate Spider-Man is for a long time a great distillation of everything that worked. Just sort of like retold and modernized and everything, and some of those aspects kind of made it into the movies, and it's sort of the Spider-Man that everybody's fallen in love with since, who wasn't necessarily a comic person beforehand. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that Untold, when the early Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, and then the Untold tale that sort of fills in the gaps or issues, or it's like, in the nooks and crannies, there's other stories that Kurt and Patrick Alla for most of it was. I think Mike Allred does one of the annuals, but I think that stuff is again the real template. That's your, no one's really done it better, I don't think, since then.
Right.
I mean, again, I can argue. I mean, like I said, Static is I remember reading Static when Static was out from Milestone. And that was, the first time I felt like reading those early Spider-Mans. Kamala Khan's another one, like I said. Buffy's another one, and definitely Invincible from Kirkman at Image.
Yeah,
definitely helps.
No, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll say for me also what I think is interesting about Spider-Man that is, as a teen hero, that I don't necessarily I've encountered this with other teen heroes, is for me, like I know when a Spider-Man story is working when I'm disappointed when the scene changes to whatever it's going to be, right? So if I'm in a Peter scene and we're doing the high school teenage Archie comics drama stuff, right? And then the bad guy shows up and I'm kind of like, oh God, like, you know what I mean? And I'm mad.
Sure.
I know that's working. And then vice versa also, when I'm in the Spider-Man like action stuff and everything's kind of going and it's exciting and the story's hitting its climax, and then it kind of becomes like an Aunt May thing, and it goes back to Peter. I'm like, like when the shifting gears kind of like breaks my heart but doesn't deter me from reading, that's when Spider-Man really works really well. And I can't for the life of me think of maybe Robin in the 90s when Chuck Dixon was doing it. This is the Tim Drake Robin.
Yep, most of Tom Lyle stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, no, that's again some really great stuff in there too. But most of the stuff I like from Dixon at the time was stuff we've talked about it plenty of times. Zach, is the idea that he got the mixing of the characters so well, and he was one of those issues of them just hitting around, like the issue of him and of Tim and Nightwing just swinging around doing stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he got those character pieces really did well. Not that I didn't enjoy Robin. I read Robin. I read Robin for a really long time, and I liked the book and I liked the character. But I think a lot of times his biggest strength was just having those moments of characters just talking and being characters.
And I think, and I think that goes kind of hand in hand with what's interesting about Robin is that he's a legacy character, and that every person that put on the cape after Dick, the original one, has kind of been different in some way. And so I think that those scenes that Dixon is writing with Nightwing and Tim Drake Robin, where Tim's not the natural athlete that Dick is. You know what I mean? He's not naturally gifted. He's not necessarily like born for this, right? He's like Tommy was saying, he hasn't been training for this since he was a toddler, essentially. Like he was a normal kid until he deduced that Batman was Bruce Wayne. Right. Which is like what brings him to the table, is that Tim is more of his intellect is kind of more of his selling point, right? And his deductive prowess and things like that. But he never really even wanted to be a Robin. That was the interesting thing about that story. He thought Batman needed a Robin and was trying to convince Dick to go back to being Robin.
For a long time, especially in that book, one of the through lines is like, Tim kept saying, I'm going to quit and hang it up. I'm not going to do this forever.
Yeah.
Remember that? Yeah. That was like the big thing, was like, he kept saying, there would be aside moments with different characters. He'd be like, no, I'm done. I'm getting to a certain point. I'll hang up my cape and be somebody else. And it felt like realistically like he would. And then, for different reasons and reboots and rebirths they've done, they keep bringing him back.
Yeah. No, I agree. So, okay. So let's get off Robin and Spider-Man, unless anybody's got something else to say.
No, I got something to say, but I'm going to change our gears here just a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm going to bring up a couple teen heroes that I've thought of while listening to all this that I don't think we thought of before, and I think we did not think of them because they don't fit that same type of mold as Robin and Spider-Man.
Okay.
And the first one actually predates both of them, and that is Billy Batson, Captain Marvel, Shazam.
Okay.
Who also was, thinking back, an emancipated kid like Spider-Man, but long before Spider-Man, because he was out there as an orphan on his own, doing his own thing with people thinking he was an adult.
Right.
And then we can come back to him. And the other one I was just going to throw out that I was thinking of is one of my all-time favorites, which is Kitty Pryde. And we met her first as I believe 13-year-old girl when she joined the X-Men. And so she just serves a different storytelling device in those books, a little bit different than even Robin did for Batman. But I was just thinking of some of those that we omitted from before.
Yeah, I think Captain Marvel's an interesting one, just for the idea that, again, it's a situation where, that one's total wish fulfillment of, I don't want to be a kid.
Right.
I'm literally going to say a magic word, and then I don't have to be a kid anymore.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's like such an elegant, simple idea, and I think the versions of Captain Marvel that don't essentially paint him as a kid in an adult body, I just don't see the point of it. Then I'm like, why do this character?
Right, when the hero is an adult, an alter ego almost.
Yeah.
No, I like it being the kid in the big body, which the movie does very well. Zachary Levi's great.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, the Shazam movie is phenomenally. It gets it right. It pulls it off. It pulls it off nicely.
The big thing about that is, when they rebirth Captain Marvel into Shazam, I think that's one of the things I think I like the idea of a kid in the adult body trying to be, basically Tom Hanks and Big. I think that works fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that at all. What I took it when I remember when they did the rebirth, it was, now we have to give her, Billy Batson has to be some kind of juvenile delinquent, for lack of a better term.
Right.
And I never thought, from the beginning, I was perfectly fine with Billy being a good kid whose parents happen to die, and then he happens to get bestowed upon him these great powers.
I am as well. The movie does go with the rebirth
Like,
route, and it does
Yeah.
work. It still does have enough heart to work, but I definitely prefer just like the good kid Billy.
yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think one of the great versions that you could see of it is the showcase animated
Mhm.
short that they did, the Superman and Captain Marvel against Black Adam thing, and I like that
Is that just
it's just Billy Batson is got is pure of heart essentially, and it's sort of like we
Mhm.
can trust you with this, like he's essentially
Right.
kind of a chosen one in
Yes,
this
absolutely.
because
Yeah.
he's idealist and he's optimistic and everything like that, and there's not a whole lot of that anymore.
No, no. Well, I mean, it's one of those things where like I always looked at it because I remember it's one of those, growing up when I did, they had, that ridiculously weird Shazam show that was on, Saturday mornings with live action.
Right. With
Oh,
the
yeah,
Where you had
Winnebago,
one,
right?
yeah,
And Mentor.
yeah, with a big mentor, and you had the weird like, clutch cargo mouths on all the gods talking to Billy. But it was one thing between that and like the treasury size of the old like CC Beck, you know, Shazam or Captain Marvel stories from the 30s. And then you also had like the Shazam Power Hour. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. It was animated, it was Filmation.
Yeah, Filmation did that one. I used to watch that when I was really little.
And then you had, remember, they also had the high school kids that were the sidekicks, right? Or they were teenage superheroes. Do you remember that, Clifton?
I do not remember that.
Okay, well that's for another show. But it was a whole. It was that they were animated characters, but they were also live action kids that like sang rock and roll ish music. But anyway, it was one of the things where from the beginning I always thought, well, Billy Batson does the right thing because he does the right thing, and then it's like Captain America. All it does is the powers that he gets makes him that much better and able to do that much more. Right? I think we talked about it in the when we talked about the animated stuff a couple episodes back. We talked about the idea that Captain Marvel is even sunnier than Superman when you put them up against each other, which is really hard to do. But again, I think on Unlimited they did a great job in, was it Crash?
Yeah.
Okay, in that episode they managed to show you, well, no, Billy Batson would be that much sunnier and that much brighter than Superman if that's possible, But yeah, and the other one when you said Clifton was about Kitty, I mean, yeah, she fills a storytelling device of introducing you to the X-Men, but also I always think about that moment in Astonishing X-Men where Whedon has her say that Emma Frost, because they're both introduced in the same issue back in the 80s, it's hard for me to trust you because you've been trying to kill me since I was like 13 years old.
Right.
and that very much informs her character. Like, what we were saying earlier about Xavier's Institute is the idea that there are evil mutants, there are people that they would kill them, and I don't think Kitty Pryde was quote unquote indoctrinated just so that she could fight Xavier's war.
She was an interesting character also, that I think that she was one of the few, occasionally you come across like a teen hero that gets to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And she is part of a pretty small batch of characters that were that kind of aged with the reader, like Dick Grayson was one, and Wally West was one, and what's his Arsenal was another one, or Speedy.
Right.
Yeah.
And with Kitty Pryde, Claremont did some very fun stuff with that transition, where she had been with the X-Men, in the Hellfire Saga and all that.
Right.
And then New Mutants came along, which were the kids that were actually her age,
Mm-hmm.
where they tried to say, like, okay, now here's your friends, go train with them. And she's like, wait a second, like, I've been with the adults this whole time. Why are you putting me at the kiddie table?
Right. Yeah. Professor Xavier's a jerk.
Yeah.
Right.
Classic panel.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think when we do think about teenage superheroes, I think it's a good choice. I wouldn't have thought about Kitty, even though, yeah, I read all those, early appearances, and when she's trying to find a code name, which I thought was interesting because, she doesn't stick with anything for quite a while, which I thought was, more than I think about it now, she's a kid, and when she's putting together a costume, she's Sprite, right. She's got the roller skates and
Ariel.
Was that intentional? I've always been curious about that. So, I mean,
I don't know.
Do you think that was, I mean, it works in that sense when you put that light on it does work, but I've always been puzzled about, I mean, was that just Claremont kind of just like, I don't really like this name, let's try this one out, let's try that one. I never really quite knew what the deal was there.
Well, some of those costumes are pretty hideous, so I hope they weren't planned to stay around.
No, they're pretty awful. But it's one of those things where I remember reading a couple months ago, I was reading, I saw something about the idea was did Claremont intend for not, for Kitty to be not only a Jewish superhero, but he intend for her to be a gay superhero or a lesbian superhero? And because of the constraints of the time, he couldn't really let her be what she wanted to be. And I wonder now that it was, looking back, was it something where it was the search for identity was very central to her character because she couldn't be what she wanted to be.
Oh, interesting. No, I never heard that before.
Yeah, I hadn't either, but someone brought up some stuff in Excalibur and other stuff, after she's out of, quote unquote, being a teenager in X-Men, where it's more of an like there's hints of exploration that doesn't come. I mean, it's never, it was always, to me, it was always she was in love with Colossus, but it's hard to say because I don't think it's ever been addressed by Claremont that I know of.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to save Wally West for later on, but
I'm surprised we haven't tried to go there yet.
Yeah.
No, I know. He is a unique one, and that's why I kind of want to save that. And
right.
But what about Miles Morales? So, how does the classic Spider-Man kind of inform him, and how is it same but different? Would you say?
I mean, it's one of those, from his first appearance, it's pretty much a situation where he's kind of stepping up on his own. Like we see him. Don't we see him first, and then he comes? Like we find out what his deal is later, if I remember correctly. Like
I actually have to confess that I'm really confused about how this all worked out because I was not really reading Ultimate at the time, and I kind of picked his book up when it started, and then when his stuff got all rolled into the Marvel universe proper, I never quite knew like what was kept and what was thrown out.
Yeah, I'm not sure either because
anymore.
I haven't read all that stuff either. I just remember during like Ultimatum, which I think those or near Ultimatum or whatever that is, whatever one of the last miniseries was. Because I hadn't read Ultimate Spider-Man or the Ultimate books at that point. I just knew they were wrapping it all up. That if I remember correctly, it was one of those deals where it's kind of like there needs to be a Spider-Man, and I've got these spider powers, so I'm going to be, a version of Spider-Man. I like the character a lot. I mean, it's hard to argue with the success of Into the Spider-Verse, right?
Sure.
I mean, when
it's
Oscar,
fantastic.
Yeah.
Man, it's a great thing, and the fact that it's fantastic as well doesn't hurt it. But no, I just think it's one of those things where the idea of, of there being a Spider-Man legacy is not a bad thing. I think that works. I think the idea that Peter Parker didn't have to be Spider-Man forever.
Right.
Other characters can pick up that thing, and you could argue that they tried to pass it on to Ben Reilly at one point, and that didn't quite. They didn't. That didn't really work out, and there were other characters that sort of fill the void. I guess you get your Spider Womans and your Silks and your Spider Girls and.
Oh, that's right. Silk is another really good one, I think.
Wait a minute, you guys forgot how Miles Morales came about, or I'm a little confused.
No, I don't remember well enough. I just remember that in the Ultimate Spider-Man, Peter dies.
But you remember how it stemmed preceding that, right? I mean,
no, that's what I think some of us need some help on.
Yeah, I don't quite remember.
All it started was from Community, in which Donald Glover woke up in the Spider-Man costume.
Oh yeah, well, is that sure?
The whole push for him to be Spider-Man, in which naysayers were saying, no, Spider-Man can never be black.
Well, it's also
at the time.
It's also the fact that Bendis is Bendis' kid. He wanted to do something for his kid also. So that was another big push too.
Yeah, but that's what made it personal for him. Right? He put upon himself talking to the editor team at Ultimate, and then created Miles Morales and killed off Peter, just to prove a point. The character exploded as a result of what we get now. But it was all from of people saying that what Spider-Man can't be. And the whole thing with Spider-Man, him wearing a full bodysuit, is the fact that anybody can be Spider-Man. That's what it resonated with a lot of minorities. Ultimately, when you look at Spider-Man, he's not your typical white character. I mean, who's under the mask, but ultimately it could be anybody under the mask. You can dress anybody of any nationality, even a woman can dress up as Spider-Man and be Spider-Man. But the fact that they're clung to Peter, it made no sense. And on top of that, to me, Ben Reilly didn't work because it's just Peter clone, just different name. You know,
know.
and never.
Oh, I know. I
Yeah,
was there.
the character. It's like Peter from a broken home or something. It was crazy. But that's to me why.
And Peter was grown up by that point too, with the Ben Riley stuff. Like he was supposed to be in his 20s at that point, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
Like he was a man at that point,
Yeah.
or at least in college. But again, I can't remember because I wasn't picking up a whole lot of Spider-Man in the 90s. It was only Untold Tales, really.
Yeah. Peter's definitely at that point, he's aged definitely out of high school. He graduated high school before, way earlier than that. And then ever since that point, it's kind of like, again, I go back to the Buffy the Vampire Slayer, kind of is the idea that once they get her out of high school, they don't really know what to do with her. Same thing with Peter.
Okay.
Well,
that was going to be my next question. No, that was going to be my next question because I know you and Tommy love Buffy and that whole world. And I was curious that, like, does it work as well when they're out of high school? Because in my opinion, I don't think Spider-Man does work as well. There's ways that you can sell it to me for sure, but I think he works better in the high school setting. So yeah, so that's what I was going to ask. So you don't think that it works as well either?
Well, I mean, my thing is just the fact, like in Buffy, for sure, when you say, Tommy, that a lot of the metaphors for stuff is high school problems and it happens to be monster related.
Yeah, but the whole thing with Buffy, to me, I think people sort of pushed aside is the fact that Slayers die.
True.
Buffy was the oldest Slayer ever. Every time a Slayer came before her, they died. Hence why there are so many people lined up to be a Slayer. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, according to how Whedon put it along, a Slayer wasn't expected to live a certain point, and then one was ready to take the man at a moment's notice. It was almost set up that way. So to have a Slayer live as long as Buffy did was outside the norm. And when it pushed it that far, it became weird. But it's the whole concept to me of forever. I just don't get that. I mean, what I mean by that is, yeah, we see the hero at this point and all that, but isn't that the whole role of the teenage superhero to take up on the mantle when the mentor dies, or to eventually grow in, well, to eventually become great?
Sometimes.
How long are they going to be a teenager,
Okay.
you know?
Sometimes, but when we think about it, I mean, again, if we're getting back to Spider-Man's got nowhere to graduate to.
Well,
he's
already
that's what
before he even became a boy, in my opinion.
Right. So but Robin, when given a choice of, I mean, eventually he does.
Yes.
But the first thing when he decides that he wants to go, quote unquote, basically stop being Robin is he becomes what? Becomes Nightwing, right?
Yeah, he does.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's one of those things where we have that moment of you graduate from being a kid hero, but again, part of that is either your mentor, your main hero would have to die or retire or whatever.
Yeah.
In order for you to become, the thing that you're supposed to be working towards. I mean, I get it, but I mean, I think Nightwing is far more successful than most characters that try to graduate into being the character that's taken over the mantle. It doesn't last very long normally.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's just at one point do they? I mean, to me, the teenage hero almost works best in the learning process, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, when they stop learning, they end up not or losing their shine that they initially started with.
Right.
I mean, that's what I get from a lot of teenage heroes.
No,
As soon as they become mature, all of a sudden we get born. Like what you're saying with Buffy. As soon as she gets into college, her those teenage problems that she used to have, they don't relate anymore. She's starting to age. You become wiser. She ends up becoming a teacher, correct?
I believe counselor.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. She did graduate as a counselor, but I'm just saying as far as it started out her become the plucky person that goes against the rules to become the person that is the teacher or is the leader, so to speak. And then her outlandish concepts or rules are pushed out the door. And then she becomes the very thing that she pushed up against. To me, isn't that with all teenage superheroes that they end up becoming like the trite or old or whatever you want to call it?
But I think that's life more than anything else.
Yeah, but at that point, you have to. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, so where I was going to go running with that idea was outside of comics is a spot where I think that's done really well is Young Justice, the TV show, because really, if I'm thinking about that show, as I was thinking about this episode, the stuff that I really gravitate towards the teen hero for, which is, as I've said before, the Archie comics, the Saved by the Bell teen drama stuff. That stuff I'm thinking about in Young Justice, it's there, but it's not at all the front and center of the kind of conflict that you see in that show. That show is very much more geared about, I think, becoming who you're going to be, and are you going to become your mentor? Are you going to be doing it differently? Are you performing to the level that your mentor wants you to be performing at?
Right. There's lots about
Right.
legacies. Are you going to live up to a legacy? Or are you going to go against a bad legacy, such as Artemis
Yeah.
with
Mhm.
her background? Yeah. I mean, Young Justice definitely plays with that a lot.
Yeah, but
Right.
but they struggle with the spotlight too. And what I mean by that is, at one point, and we were discussing how I think it was Frank who was talking about how he didn't appreciate the later seasons due to the robust characters that are on the screen. I don't think they make the transition well either. To me, that's the same problem that comes up with Legion of Superheroes. As soon as you get the characters to a mature level, all of a sudden they don't know how to transition it to a younger crop or younger batch, in which they struggle with the robust character. I mean, so many characters on the screen. Like with the third season of Young Justice, they don't know how not to show the old ones, and while they're struggling to show new ones, it's almost that they don't know how to let go of the younger heroes who are now matured in order to give the new ones a bigger spotlight. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it should spotlight the younger heroes always, regardless of who it involves, and then try to phase out the older ones because they're no longer part of the team. I don't think it does a great job of that. I think it panders to the audience, in which you grew up with these ones. We're not going to let it go. We're still going to keep them in mind. However, there's new ones coming up every generation.
Well, but I do think that there's something interesting to be said about the cast from the first season now being essentially the teachers, the one becoming the mentors. And I do think that so I'm going to half disagree with you. I do think that season 3, I think it's crowded. I think, and I think the show's too heavy at that point because it's introducing so many new people, and
Mhm.
not a whole lot of people get a chance to really get the spotlight just yet. So I'll agree with you on that. But I think that there is something to be said about seeing the old group kind of come back into this new role.
Yeah, but I mean, I get your nostalgia for it, but to me, it's almost a different show. If you're gonna show me that group of people, it's gonna stay with that group of people. But I don't think the story is with that group of people. I think the story is always going to be the younger generation. I think it'll be a stronger show if it just dealt with the younger generation. I mean, you have stories with the older generation. That's great. But how many great stories are you missing out on this newer generation? Just because you don't want to, just because they weren't the first to start the group. You know, it doesn't mean they're less.
But again, though, I think that there's something to be said about seeing Dick graduate to becoming now the person that's training all the new kids. And how is he going to do it differently from Batman and Black Canary and Red Tornado that all did it for them?
Yeah, but
right? Like, what is he going to take from his mentors, and what's he going to be his, and what of himself is he going to put into it? Which is like what Clifton was saying. Like, that's kind of the whole point of the show, is sort of like doing that dance.
Yeah, but the reason why Miles shines so much is because Peter died. I don't think Miles would have never got that shine if Peter never died. It almost it forced the character into the limelight. Once you take the spotlight off the character who has moved on, you can then emphasize the new character. If not, then why even show me a new character?
Mm.
That's why. I get your nostalgia or your love of the previous character, but it becomes a different show. Am I watching Young Justice or am I watching Dick Grayson's life?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Right.
what I see it as. I get your love of the character, and it should be maybe a spinoff or something altogether different. But give me Young Justice. Don't give me Dick Grayson's life. It becomes totally different, in my opinion.
Again, I'll half agree with you on there. I think the trouble is ultimately, yeah, that they don't focus enough on some of the younger ones that they introduce. right? And that there's some characters that are just kind of in the background, and we don't really like Tracy 13. Like I don't quite know why Tracy 13 is there just yet.
Not because they don't emphasize Tracy 13. It's almost as
You know,
if, let's say in the first season, did you care that what Batman was doing off camera?
I did.
But they didn't show it to you.
Well, you're just obsessed with Batman.
I am.
but your obsession with Batman didn't supersede your curiosity to see what Robin was doing, right?
No, but it was his relationship with him that I found interesting.
Yeah, but
right, and the moments in the first season where Batman is giving Aqualad essentially some attention, and Dick is kind of being like, "Why is my dad essentially paying attention to this other guy?" And Dick is in the gym training, and you know, as we've been saying the whole show, he's a gymnast, been training from essentially the time he could walk to do, you know, backflips and somersaults and everything, and he's doing his calisthenics on his balance beam, and he does a flip, and he lands on the balance beam and doesn't stick it, and he kind of like falls off, and then he's frustrated and punches the wall. Like I think that's an interesting dynamic of that says a lot about where he is with Batman in that moment.
Yeah, but it shows that your emphasis on him, not the group. Does that make that? But you see what I'm trying to say,
right? But that scene doesn't work without Batman peripherally there.
But
that's the point I'm making.
No, but I get that. But it's not about Batman. It's never about Batman. It's the dynamics of the group.
Well, I think this discussion is like something we could talk about when we talk about Young Justice, because I think we're getting a little too far afield of what we're trying to talk about.
No, I get that, but it still deals with teenage heroes. My point being is the fact of it takes away from. I like the dynamic of the teenage hero, and it starts becoming about the teenage hero. I think that's as to why you found less interested in it as well, because it then personalized it about certain heroes. To me, the dynamic of the teenage hero has a fresh take on something, and as their personal relationships between one another, and with each new character introduced, it becomes something different. It doesn't become familiar. It just becomes different. Like with young people, I don't think they emphasize it enough in that show. I think they take the spotlight off it and emphasize certain characters due to how they resonated with the first season. But to me, that's what I would like to come back to, the whole teenage superhero thing. It's the whole dynamic feel. So I know I said in the beginning with Robin with this energy, but it's that energy of that youthful energy or that disruption that it encompasses. That's what makes it interesting to me.
I think a better take on what you're looking for, Tommy, is something like Runaways. Like
Yeah.
I think Runaways did a really good job from what I've seen of it. I haven't finished it, but in the comic as well as in the TV series, the idea that, you know, we have all these things we have to deal with. Oh, and by the way, we're still kids.
Yeah, but that's what makes it interesting with teenage heroes.
Right. Or
Runaways is one of my absolute favorite comics.
It's fantastic. Brian K. Vaughan does a fantastic job with it.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where when I think about a more modern take on, say, a superhero team, you know, I think it is one of those things where, you know, I think that does it better team wise than some other books. That and if anyone's familiar with Young Avengers, the one that set up the some of the characters we're getting now in the MCU.
Right, was it Alan Heinberg?
Yes, and Jim Chung, I believe, is the artist on most of those first couple miniseries.
Right.
But that same thing where you're basically taking legacy characters or familial characters or characters that are, you know, related to the Avengers.
Right. That's where you got Hulkling and Stature and Patriot.
Right.
Is Kate Bishop in that group as well?
That's the one. That's the one I couldn't think of. Thank you, Zach.
Yep.
That was
no. I think she's the standout of that group. I think, and you know, for you guys listening that don't know who Kate Bishop is, if the MCU uses her, she's probably going to be a lot of people's favorites. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she's supposed to be in the Disney Plus show.
Yeah.
So, she's supposed to be. Yeah. It's supposed to be in a Hawkeye show. But I think those two teams from Marvel are really good examples of modern takes on the superhero team, and still managed to do a lot of the teenage drama stuff that you might be looking for that maybe we're not getting, or we didn't get enough of in Young Justice. Because again, I agree with Tommy, but I don't really want to go. I I don't get a Young Justice discussion because I could say a lot about that
Right.
last season.
That'll be on our spotlight on Young Justice.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll talk more about that then. But I think like those two. But Tommy brought up one that I don't think people think enough of as being that kind of stuff, even though it had a fair amount of it. It also is Legion of Superheroes. The comic definitely has some of that stuff in it, but I also think they sort of gave themselves that to me is more of a Young Justice type template, because there is some of that soap opera stuff. There is some of those, will this person get together with that person or not? But they also sort of like early on create a situation where like, if you decide you want to get married in Legion, you're out. You know, that's part of their code. That's part of their deal, is like, and that to me is like, well, you know, that you're going to marry someone who's a teenager like you, that means you're going to mature and get to a point where you're quote unquote an adult, and then you marry and then you're done.
Yes.
You know, right? And that was a situation that they wrote in the book early. And again, I guess, you know, it's, you know, to me, it's like saying to again, at that point in the 50s, and that's when those stories come out in the early 60s, you know, your audience still is primarily teenage kids or kids. So the idea of getting married obviously is a moment of like, oh, whoa, you're not a kid anymore. You can't be part of our superhero teenage club at that point.
Right.
Right.
And I mean, I know that you guys are the resident experts on Legion of Superheroes. I am not. But, you know, I know that in some versions you've seen of it where the characters have sort of gotten older a little bit and things in that nature, but I don't know. I mean, are there adult heroes in the 30th century at that point? Like, I mean, do you meet them at all?
Not really.
No, I thought about that. It was in my head for a good 45 minutes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, there's not really, I mean, they do, like, they'll do, the funny thing is, like, back when you occasionally get Legion superhero stories and stuff is known, like typically like I'm talking about like the Kurt Swan stuff, some of the Jim Shooter stuff. We're talking early on.
Okay.
When they really started to form the identity of what that team was. You did have, like, every now and then you have an imaginary story or a future story where Superman would show up, and you would have, instead of Lightning Lad, you have Lightning Man.
Right.
Or Cosmic Man instead of Cosmic Boy, or, you know, Saturn. I'm trying to think what hers was, Saturn Queen or Saturn Queen's a villain. But it would be, you know, you'd have these versions of them as adults, and like they would have like receding hairlines and, you know, a paunch, like a gut. But they were still doing it. But then they were still doing the superhero thing. But typically, like, if you're thinking like, you know, the 80s stuff, the Giffen, Paul Levitz, Larry Malstead, you know, that era of right before Great Darkness Saga, you know, it's more like they're teens, but they're mostly in their early 20s, wouldn't you say, Tommy?
Yeah, for the most part. Well, I would say 20. I mean, they create as that 20s, late teens type of thing. They never get specific as to what the ages are. But yeah, you're right with the at least with the scope or the range of what they're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
They become a little more later teen. I would say they're closer. They're on the cusp of being 20 or 21. Again, it's the future, so why would our standards of being an adult still matter to them?
Right.
So that never made any sense to me whatsoever. But
okay.
But it's one of those things where it becomes a thing of, you know, they're more. I think the only time I would say they really try to grow them up is when, Tommy?
Oh, the 5-year gap.
Yes, the 5-year gap is where they really kind of put a stamp on things of like, 5 years pass, everything's messed up. You know, this bright, beautiful future Legion that we once had of like, yeah, the future turns out okay. No, it's not so great anymore. I mean, it's a great story, and I love it. It's one of my favorite eras of Legion. Some people think it's garbage, but I think it's terrific. But it's basically, that's what happens is the United Planets are falling apart. There's a plot that's behind the scenes of, you know, these villains are doing stuff. But no, there's not really a moment where they have a chance. I mean, they're still, like I said, that's the closest you get to them actually being quote unquote adults. And ever since then, it's been, you know, 0 Hour or a reboot here, a rebirth there. And, you know, where someone comes along and it's like, well, here's my take on what Legion should be. And it always seems to be of trying to reset it back to what it was of them being teenage superheroes. But you fall in the same tropes of, well, Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl got together, so surely they're going to get together. Otherwise, your older fans are going to be upset. As opposed to just saying, wiping the slate clean and being like, nah, none of this. I mean, the closest I can say then now is what Bendis is doing, is the idea that maybe the stuff that's been come before is different in the future, is something you don't really know much about.
Right. Okay. So hang on. So we're running out of time over here. So I want to get into Wally West before we get out of here, because I think Wally West has a very unique spot in the pantheon of teen heroes because he is really the first to be the sidekick of Kid Flash, teaming up with the Flash, that gets to graduate and grow up to become the Flash ultimately.
Right.
So, Frank,
So-
I'll go to you because I know you're a huge Wally
Right.
West guy.
I love Wally West. I mean, I love reading the. I remember we had a neighbor in the books that he had. A lot of the books that he had when I was a kid. He had a bunch of early Flash, like the Carmine Infantino stuff, all that old stuff. So that's where I first saw like Kid Flash and Elongated Man, and I was lucky enough to be able to go through these books. They were awesome. But to see Wally grow up, and then you have Crisis, and he quits for a while before that in Titans, and doesn't want to really be. He gets, I think he believes he gets cancer at one point. That's another reason why he quits. But for him to come back and then become the Flash in Crisis because of everything that happens with Barry, and then he's like the Flash for like what, 25, 30 years?
Wally?
Something like that? How long is Wally the Flash?
Yeah, something like that, right? It's pretty much.
Up
Well, no,
until-
it doesn't go to New 52, so it's pretty much Crisis on Infinite Earths, right? Until maybe
Final Crisis.
Yeah, Final
Is
Crisis.
the Final Crisis. Okay,
Yeah, Final Crisis is when Barry comes back. So, I mean, for an entire generation of people, he's the Flash.
Yeah.
Right? You watch again, we talk about Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, like that's their Flash. That's the Flash that people know.
The funny thing is for me too, it's that like, so if you look at the Justice League movie,
Mhm.
and this is what cracks me up about it, because I'm not the biggest fan of that movie, but what cracks me up about that is that the Flash in there is Barry Allen, but they write him like Wally. They like anytime Flash is in the
Yes.
Justice League stuff in other media, he's typically always the comic relief guy, and I'm like,
Mhm.
that's not who Barry is, right? Like,
no. Barry, but for most of his life, he wears the bow tie. I mean, that's not your comic relief. It's not, he's very much straightforward. I'm a forensic scientist. I do my bit. I solve crimes by, meticulous work. Generally that guy's not your comic relief. And I agree with you. That's one thing about the Justice League movie I can't stand is the fact that you could have just said it was Wally West. I mean, I understand, especially if you want to create a new identity for yourself and for that team. When you have, I mean, granted, when you weren't going to use Grant Gustin, who's great as the Flash, I like that show a lot. But the idea that you have a successful Flash show with Barry Allen and you don't want to use him to be your Flash in your movie, and then the character that you do create is basically Wally West, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
right?
You just could use Wally. So
Yep. Oh, we could do a whole show on
Okay.
Wally.
I could, especially with the stuff that they've done to him at DC lately. So
Yeah, exactly. Any thoughts on Wally really quick before we start wrapping up?
Nah, just wish they didn't change him. Wish they didn't kill him off or whatever they did to him, which makes less sense.
mhm.
He's a great character. I believe a lot of people know the Flash to be Wally, not Barry. Barry didn't have as
Right.
strong of a personality. His greatest, I think, legacy was his death, and they negated that. So I blame
Right.
Didio for that. But ultimately, what people read was Wally. So there's no template to use for Barry. That's why they sucked up Wally.
Right.
I'm
Go
gonna
ahead.
agree with Tommy on stuff because, like, yeah, Wally, like Barry was the Flash on Super Friends that I knew, but like that Flash was pretty 2-dimensional,
Yes.
and then Wally was the one that I got to know, and
Right.
and like he definitely earned his legacy spot as Flash. So I wasn't that keen on them bringing Barry back.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting you bring that up, the fact that early on, like one of the things I found the most charming about Wally, especially after reading him for so long, is the fact that one, he's a superhero from the time he's like 12 or 13, pretty consistently, and then, like I said, goes away and get his cancer, and then comes back in the Crisis. But from that point on, like early on in that book, in his own Flash book, he's conflicted about replacing Barry. And you don't get a lot of that when you have the idea of a teenage superhero replacing their mentor. Wally's like, I don't want people to forget Barry. I don't want people to think that I'm trying to replace him. I mean, he was my hero. He was important to me.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I was going to get into. And one of the favorite aspects for me is that early on in his book, he's not as fast as Barry.
No, not at all.
Like he can only break Wally can only break the sound barrier essentially running. And
Right.
it's not until spoiler
Yeah.
alert, it's not until sort of like he starts becoming his own man and and starts being okay with him being the Flash now
Right.
that he's able to surpass Barry, and actually
Yeah.
he's faster than him down the line. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There's even an instance when talking about the fact that Wally is not as fast as Barry, and he basically tries to get faster early on. There's a moment where someone, and it's kind of a nod to what they do with Barry in Crisis, and I won't ruin it for anybody, but someone says, I don't really think Barry Allen was human after he had the accident, like after he gets struck by lightning. And it's one of those things where, for a while, like I said, Barry seems to be, and it's with the fans, it's a meta moment where he's definitely with the fans as well as with himself, where he's just trying to catch Barry to be, like you said, become his own man, and then basically step fully into the mantle of being the Flash. And then he's the Flash. So, like I said, I'm a huge Wally mark. I like the character quite a bit. So
yeah, no, me too. But so let's start wrapping up. But I guess in the vein of Wally West, who is a teen hero that we would like to see sort of outgrow their status of being a sidekick and become sort of the main hero? Stumped everybody.
Nah, I was thinking the Legion. I just would like to have seen them grow out of their teenage role, and a lot. It's part of the 5-year gap in that regards. I just wanted to see them mature and bring another group outside of the main group, just to see what they could do outside of that. That's all. It's not too many main characters I like to see relinquish their roles. Like, I mean, the list goes on, but specifically, I just wanted the Legion to mature and bring in another younger group. I mean, it's no different to me than the New Mutants, basically.
Okay.
For me, it's I'm really excited about the idea of Kamala Khan becoming bigger than Carol Danvers, original Ms. Marvel. I think a lot of when you go back, I don't know if you go back and reread Ms. Marvel from the 70s, and people talk about having an agenda, and again, I'm not saying having an agenda is a wrong thing, but it's one of those. You look at what was trying to be done, with Ms. Marvel back in the 70s, and you look at this how well told Kamala Khan's story is, and it's perfectly natural, and there's no quote unquote agenda with it, to my knowledge. It's just, no, this is what this girl's background is and her lifestyle, and and then she happens to get gifted, she happens to get the Terrigen Mist, and then from that point on, she's Ms. Marvel. I love that about her story. I'm very excited to see what they do with that character within the greater confines of the Marvel television and stuff, whether they decide television or movie is the way to go. So that's my one that I think she'll surpass Ms. Marvel and Captain Marvel.
Okay. Clifton, you got one?
No, I mean, I was trying to think of some, but like all the ones I can think of pretty much did serve the role that I think I'd want to see. Like, I mean, a lot of them, I think we're going to get like a Kate Bishop. We've seen Kate Bishop be a Hawkeye of sorts. I think we'll continue to see that. Like, I'd be curious to see the Runaways like grown up and like from the situation they're in and who they become. But I also love them as teenagers, so I'm not sure I want to see that after all. But it would be interesting, probably.
Hey, quick question: is Falcon's a sidekick, but not a teenage sidekick, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
But Bucky was a teen sidekick who then became Captain America eventually.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Never mind.
No, Sam was always his own person.
Yeah.
And then was always an adult, and then became Falcon. So
okay.
So no surprise here, I'm going to go with a Batman character, because I do think an interesting aspect of the Batman family is that it's made up almost entirely of teenage heroes. But one of my favorite eras was when Stephanie Brown, the spoiler, became Batgirl.
Right. Sure.
She was Robin for a little while too, but I liked especially when she became Batgirl, because I liked the idea of that Robin and Batgirl are sort of like essentially the training wheels for everybody, that everybody when they first come on board, like that's the mantle that they take up, and then they ultimately grow up to become their own thing, like Nightwing or Red Robin down the road, or when Cassandra Cain became like Black Bat, and then she became Orphan after that and stuff like that. So Stephanie Brown's my vote. I would have liked to have seen her progress from Batgirl to her own thing older, which is funny because for her it kind of went in reverse. She was her own thing first and then kind of graduated into being in the family. And I would have liked to have seen her go out again and graduate. So, yeah. Okay. Well, that's teenage superheroes in a nutshell. Thank you all for listening. And I wanted to point out to you guys also that our comment section is open on letmeknowhowitis.com. So if there's a topic you want us to tackle, leave us a comment and suggest something for us, and we could possibly use it on the show. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.